Welcome to the Mind Chimp Podcast. Perry, welcome to the Mind Chimp Podcast. How are you doing?
Hey, Danny, it's great to be back, man. I'm doing really good. It's a vibrant time, is how I'd describe it. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, let me take you back to May 2018. If I can remember rightly, you was in a train station and it was a chilly old May day. And that was the first time you came on the show.
Yeah.
So if listeners are only just hearing this for the first time, hit pause and go back and listen to that first episode.
Nice.
With Perry. Now, Perry, as you know, I tend to ask guests when they come on the show what their logline is. Your logline from 2018 was unashamedly positive with an appetite for learning.
Yes.
So that was in 2018. Has your logline changed any?
I would say the unashamed bit has probably expanded from positive to enthusiastic. So I know they're quite similar, right? But I think your mind might be positive, but your demeanor can be enthusiastic. And I am now both of those, I think. The learning thing, I would also add the word discerning to, because I think there's something about discerning the learning that I'm pursuing and I'm after that I think I've got a bit better at. I've got a bit sharper and more focused about what floats my boat and what interests me, however tangential it is to the things that I'm doing. So, I'm more discerning about what I pursue now from a learning point of view.
Oh, nice. Yeah. So a bit of an iteration then. I think, speaking personally, having that kind of mindset of constantly discovery, of who and what we are and how we adapt to different periods of our life is great. But I think there's also a kind of a real art of distilling down what actually tickles your fancy.
Completely that. I guess what I've sensed is that there are interests that you have and that you shouldn't talk yourself out of them because you think they might be a bit left field. But as you get into them, this is where the discerning bit comes from. It's like, now, what can I do with this? Who can I share it with? What difference will it make? And if I can't answer that, I'll kind of drop it because it's like, I've only got so much time to do this. Do you know what I mean? So I think that's where I'm going. I sort of continually explore, but I've got a very strong filter early doors about where that's going to take me. And if it won't take me anywhere, I'll drop it. And if it does, I'll go 12 ball all in. Yeah.
Yeah. And I wonder if that's I think that's one of the most valuable traits we have in this day and age. It's kind of like that beginner's mindset and that hunger to kind of keep progressing. I guess for me, it's it's what's allowed me to kind of stay ahead in my career and I think it's down to the simple fact that we're just constantly in discovery, right? It's kind of that thing what's helped me constantly stay ahead because I'm constantly discovering, constantly remixing ideas and concepts. And for me right now, it's strategy design, innovation, design thinking, product, service, experience design, and ultimately applying all that to the employee experience.
Totally that. I'll give you an example, right? The whole quiet quitting phenomena thing, when that happened, there was something in that where I started to go into it and I thought, hang on a minute, this is just a media spin on something that I don't think has the kind of merit they're attaching to it. So I dropped it ever so quickly. And I wouldn't get frustrated when people would drop it in, but I knew I'd learned enough about it to kind of go, it's a phenomena, but let's look at actually what's really going on here, which is the constant detachment of purposeful work, organizations valuing people, and the frustrating triangle you find yourself in around that. So that's a really good example where I didn't go deeply into it. I thought that it's not the thing that people are labeling it as, and I made a quick judgment call.
Nice. So I guess we've got a whole lot of stuff to talk through today, and kind of things like the kind of the most life-friendly organization in the world. But before we go forward, I want to take you right back to your childhood, Perry. When you was a child, what did you want to be when you grow up? Like, what was that thing you wanted to do?
I had a very early interest in nature systems, and particularly the animal kingdom, right? So I can remember watching on TV an advert for a thing called Wildlife magazine that came out. And I said to my mum and dad at the time, it's like, oh, I'd really like that. And they went out and subscribed me to it. And I can remember distinctly different features around different parts of the animal kingdom. And I kind of thought to myself, right, I know what I want to be now, a vet. I wanted to help animals. Right, that was the thing. Now, as I got older, what I realised to be a vet is, A, you have to euthanize animals. I wasn't pleased about that at all. And then B, that there's so much study you have to do. I'm like, oh, I'm not sure I'm that person. So I kind of ruled it out. And then I developed an interest in writing and teaching. So I thought, oh, maybe journalism and maybe teaching. And then I also realized journalism can have so much gutter aspect to it, right? I thought, oh, I don't think I want to be a sensationalist writer, right? So I kind of ruled them out as well. And I ended up in the civil service, and I'm kind of thinking, well, what happened here then? But do you know what I did a lot of in the civil service? Writing and teaching. It's so weird that I managed to manifest those things. Now, the animal kingdom nature thing still applies to me, but I'm much more interested in the wider ecosystem. So I know it's really trendy to talk about sustainability, but hell, am I one of those people who gets frustrated by people denying climate emergency? Yeah, I am. Do I see the absolute distorted way we destroy biosystems and we overpopulate on agricultural livestock? Yeah, I do. So I'm still bothered by that, but maybe from a more humanist planetary perspective.
Interesting. Okay, so I love how you've managed to kind of manifest that kind of writing stuff one way or another. So that kind of only leads me to the next, I guess, natural and logical question is like, what are you manifesting right now?
I think I'm developing an even more curious and deeper sense of wanting to know more about human motivation and why we behave like we do, right? So as we record this, it's the day after the arraignment of Donald Trump in the US on the 6th of January insurrection, right? And I look at that man and I think, how on earth did you become like you are? So narcissistic and so divisive. And I kind of like think, what goes on in our psyche that people then follow that kind of appeal, right? So I'm really, really interested in what motivates us in the sense of right and wrong, and what gives us the right, I suppose, to sit in judgment on that. That's constantly something I'm bothered about. But it's more how we come to those kind of value-based and belief systems and articulate them and want them to do something in the world that's good. That's what I really want to find out. It's like, I don't want to find out why we go dark and nasty. I want to find out how we amplify good and positive and productive and purposeful ways. And that sort of manifests itself in the way we are at work, right? Because you get leaders who are bottom line focused, only about the numbers, ignoring the damage they're inflicting on their own people. And then you kind of think, how did you get to that? Why is that good? I just want to work out how we turn them into more purpose-led, humanistic types. So that's what's really occupying me now.
Yeah, I think it's system, right? It's a system. I do sometimes think, the system, what we're part of, causes that kind of way of thinking. I guess when I think about big organizations, you often hear that statement of, culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Yeah.
Well, that's great, but if the culture and the system what you're in, if it's to produce legacy thinking and legacy doing and legacy measuring, then you're always going to be producing old legacy. Your culture is designing a strategy what's kind of there to produce legacy kind of outcomes, I guess, and it's more around that reactive and not that kind of progressive.
Totally that. And that's a really good example, actually, of how we can kind of live through those little meme type statements, right? I mean, it's debatable whether Drucker even ever said that, but it's become such a strong belief that people are now starting to almost machine-like program culture, right? And sort of say, right, we need a culture change. Here's how we machine-like program in it. And I kind of look at it and go, do you not know that this is actually a chaotic system? This is an emergent thing about millions of acts and deeds and conversations that get you to where you are. And you think you can program it to change direction? It's completely futile. Then people say, well, what do you do then? How do you arrest a culture, like you say, that's born out a legacy that is stubbornly resistant to positive change? This talks to, I think, Gemma Patterson's question, right, on LinkedIn. And there is something about the nobleness that you want to declare about what your culture should be like. And I mean noble in an absolutely true, pure sense. You can't just have a decent culture if you really want to get people fired up. It's got to be noble. It's got to light them up inside. It's got to make them feel that they are part of something bigger than themselves. But we just don't do that. We think it's sloganeering, and that's so dangerous.
Yeah, no, for sure. But I wanted to zoom in on something you just mentioned there, and it makes sense to dig into it now rather than later on. We had a question on LinkedIn from Kate who wanted us to geek out a little bit on kind of the Kinevin framework. And you just mentioned a little bit around kind of these chaotic systems. So I guess let's needle into that, and give me your thoughts on the framework. I am going to have Dave on the show at some point, but let's get into it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm absolutely fascinated when Dave talks about Knevin, because he's just got this amazing sense of making it accessible to people, even though it is super, super complicated and so on and complex. And those words are obviously in the model. So how do I use it? What do I think about it? Well, at the heart of Knevin is obviously disorder. That's the first thing to bear in mind. And I often don't even put that in the diagram because I've sort of introduced that to people. But disorder is at the heart of the need to start thinking about things like chaos, complexity, complicated and clear ways of navigating through it, of taking action, of galvanizing spirit, of defining outcomes, in designing solutions and getting somewhere that's actually more, I suppose, stabilized and less disordered, right? So there is that. So when I talk about culture, yeah, often it is a chaotic system. And the reason I say it's chaotic is because there are lots of unknowable things that happen in culture, right? You know, if we look at some of the things that have happened that's got culture tagged to it, the Downing Street party stuff, a culture of drinking and celebration in amidst all sorts of trauma and death. How on earth was that a knowable thing? It wasn't, was it? It really, really wasn't. But what was ridiculous was the responses that people had to it. They tried to make it something that was justifiable, that was of the moment. And it's almost like, this is allowing people's misdemeanors of behavior to go unchecked and to kind of trivialize something that was really damaging. So there's an example of a chaotic instance that you could never have known would happen, and the consequences there from it. So yeah, so Knevin has a lot to offer in the way we think about a situation and what we do in order to resolve it. And resolving it might be not necessarily to solve the problem, resolving how I feel about it and what I want to do about it. So Knevin's great as a mental model to then guide you into what you do about it.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think you've touched on something interesting there. Again, I'm no expert on the Knevin framework, but I sometimes think it's easy for folks to go,
Same.
oh, look at that kind of
Same
chaos over there, mistaking it for kind of a complicated system, one that has like this cause and effect kind of order to it, and it isn't right. In fact, it's far from it.
Yeah, and I think this is where people do go wrong. So talking back to Gemma's point about culture is they think it's complicated and that there are data points they can analyse to work it out. That's part of what you do to perhaps forensically analyse things that have aggregated together to create a certain instance or a certain vibe, I suppose, that's emitted from your culture. But you're right there. That's to simplify it to the point of dumbing it down and almost ignoring the fact that you need to, and again, there's a phrase I really like here, entropically. You need to entropically match culture, right? If it's fragmented and it's all over the place, to try and compress it into something definable is really hard unless you match that entropy. Now, what do I mean by that? You don't have a central team that craft a new culture and then inflict it on other people. You disperse all of the information gathering, all the sort of sense checking, all the experiments, and then you let all that come into play before you even start to bring a sense of order to it, because those experiments need to reveal what is good, bad, and indifferent about your culture and where it goes. So I think that's where we go wrong. We think culture is a team and a program we can press go on, and it's not. It's everybody playing a part, and it's how you capture it, how you then use that to define the sense of balance and imbalance in it, and then what people can find assuringly about how they enact it and bring it to life and regulate it, I suppose. So yeah, I get really frustrated when I see teams talking about culture change programs. I'm like, oh no, here we go again. It won't go where you want it to go.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm currently just building out a EX strategy.
Oh, nice.
And I'm looking at it and going, okay, how do we bring this to life? You know, part of that is kind of asking them tricky questions. I'm like, okay, we have a strategy. But actually in my book, The Insightful Innovator, there's like a massive piece in there around sense making and doing it in the right way, in a way that kind of stops the I know the solution to the challenge. But I guess even then, you're going to hit a point where you will do this massive amount of sense making, moving kind of from data to insight, and creating this kind of work that is built from the ground up on being informed by data and observation and whatever else. But you're going to hit a point where you get to hit this tension where you have this progression, I guess, pushing up, and often it's hitting a legacy thinking that's pushing back, and it's a tricky one. It's a tricky one, but I mean, yeah, maybe Perry, share your thoughts on how you overcome that.
That's a really, really good point about why a lot of this stuff bounces off and dissipates, right? Where it can potentially be well intended and you gather momentum by saying, let's fix our culture by everybody playing a part. And the leader kind of holds that space. And then it gets up to that exec team who perhaps don't like the outputs and then kind of go, no, we're not going to do that. We'll sanitize it here and we'll ignore that bit there. And then people get really frustrated, like, well, that didn't work, did it? How come? Because the intent, the declaration all felt right. So there's something about leaders understanding and appreciating their role in stewarding culture, not owning the freaking thing. Do you know what I mean? It's like, I am simply almost like a diviner, like the divining rods, right? I am divining the sense of where culture can be the peak thing for us. I am not owning or defining it, because that would be almost pompous to do that. But up there in the nicest possible way, and I don't mean to insult people in leading positions, but they should spend more time stewarding and divining than they should owning and declaring.
Yeah, love that. Who doesn't love a good bit of Peter Principle, eh? Okay, and I think that's a great sound advice as well. I might even use that as a soundbite. Before we get into and move more into that, the good kind of HR stuff, I want to take you back to your younger years. And yeah, Perry, can you tell me the first time you ever got into trouble?
Wow, trouble. That's an interesting one, isn't it? Actually, I can think of something. I was trying to, in the school holidays, recreate a scene from Tarzan, Lord of the Jungle, right? So I had figures out, and in my house we had a little bit of internal pampas grass, right? So that really dry stuff that looks a bit sort of wispy and so on. So I'd kind of set that up to be part of the jungle, and I don't know why, but I thought it'd be really good to kind of create a campfire in an ashtray. But what happened was, when I tried to create this campfire in the ashtray, it ignited the pampas grass. And so I then had to then say to my mum when she got home from work that day, it's like, Mum, sorry, I've burnt some of your pampas grass and it stinks and I broke an ashtray. Like, wow, how weird is that? Yeah. I've never told anybody that at all. Only my parents knew that.
Until now, and have a whole audience of mine should know about it.
I know.
Okay, so before I take you from childhood all the way through to where we are today, I want you to pick a number for me, please, Perry. 1 to 8.
1 to 8. Okay, I'm going to go 8 because I like it. It's the infinity symbol on its side. So yeah, I'll go 8. Yeah.
Okay, 8. So you've picked a question from my killer question list, Perry. And I'm going to give you the question now, but I don't want you to answer it until a little bit later on.
Okay.
So the question you've picked is, do you even like yourself?
Oh, okay.
Okay, let's do it. Let's jump into your career then, Perry. So, I think at this point in your career, you're firmly established, you're well known, you've got a strong identity, a proposition, and the value you provide is very, very clear. However, I want you to tell me a little bit about your anti-CV. So, what's the thing that you don't put on your CV where you're going, oof, that was a blunder, or oh, that was a bit of a cock up? Yeah, what's the things what come to mind?
I like it a lot. Yeah, I think there would be a lot of miscalculations and judgments on who to trust. I would put that down. Lots of that. Who I kind of put faith in, who I backed at the time, who I believed in, and so on. So I think there'd be plenty of those. I think there would also be some miscalculations on the scale of something that I was doing, and then I had to get bailed out by others who kind of went, "What are you doing? That won't work." It's like, "Oh shit, no, it won't." So there's definitely those. I think there would be a ridiculously optimistic viewpoint sometimes on the amount of capacity I actually had to do things. So there would be this sense that I'd commit and then commit and then commit and then think, oh my goodness me, I'm overloaded. And I was very bad at that to start off with. I think there would be a strong sense that I didn't expect people to act like me when I was trying to push boundaries and be really pioneering and demand led and all that kind of stuff. I thought I wasn't setting them up to do the same. but naively they did, because they copied me and thought that's how you do things. I should have made it very clear that this is my way. You don't have to do it my way. So there were a lot of people, I thought, around me who overstretched themselves or put themselves in positions that they weren't capable of, because they'd simply sort of tried to copy what I did, and I should have gone, oh, don't do that. I think there would also be the possibility that sometimes I would bite my lip too much when I should have picked up something and said, that's not sitting well with me, don't agree with that, that's not fair. So there were plenty of times I bit my lip and held back, and I shouldn't have done. So that's my anti-CV, I think.
Nice. Thanks, Perry. There's maybe two things I want to kind of zoom in on, if I could. So the trust one's a really interesting one to me. My default is to give people benefit of the doubt until I've got enough data to make my own opinion up on them. However, there's been a few times where I've helped someone, or only for someone to kind of, someone else looking out for me, kind of give me a heads up and be like, look, be careful with them, it's going to blow back in your face. And I've gone, I'll make my own mind up, and the eventual has happened, and I end up feeling like I was burnt. So I guess the question is, where's the tipping point between protecting yourself and being sheltered and not letting people in, versus being arms open, authentic, and often vulnerable, and letting people in, but kind of acknowledging that you may be taken for granted, or you may get you may get burnt.
That's a really, really good point. I think I've also experienced the opposite of that, where I was going along with somebody and trusting them and working with them, and somebody else then came in and said, don't do that. And I believed them too much and backed away from the other person. And it was the agenda of the other person that was the damaging one. And I'm like, whoa, what did I do there? So I'm totally with you on that, though. So I think there's a point, and I now describe it as a bit of a sensation that you sort of feel in your gut. You're like, I'm just not sure about that. I'm hearing it. I can see the logic in it. They're believable about it. But there's something inside me that is kind of not quite right. And I didn't used to listen to that, because I think I let this take over and just go, yeah, logically, that seems great. I'm going to go for it. So I think this talks to a quality that we perhaps don't always tap into, which is that inner sensing, like you said, sense making, inner sensing, and question that and use that to actually externalize some thoughts and put it into words and get that person to perhaps validate their view a bit more, so you can get this engaged again. So I think experience and maturity has taught me that, but I would have described myself in exactly the same way that you did, in that I felt I was probably easily kind of convinced or even hijacked a bit by others. Yeah, I know that sense. And the line is, does it start to make a funny feel inside? If it does, there's something to talk about there.
Yeah, nice. I think I was reading an article a few months ago, and it was sharing about how your gut feeling has been through a longer period of evolution, and that we shouldn't just be so easy to kind of ignore it, like acknowledge it, see that there's something there, but don't be so easy just to kind of, say, oh, it's gut feeling and move
completely. It's funny you say that, because I used that this week in a pitch, and where we were talking about very logical things. And as we started to talk about them, we also said, oh no, we've got to bring some of this purpose stuff in as well, right? And I said, okay, what you just described there was heart, head, and hands. And people went, oh yeah, absolutely. So the heart is the gut bit. Definitely that. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. I love the kind of head, heart, hands analogy. I think the second part to my question then is this piece around people wanting to copy you, which I find quite interesting. I think for people like us who are bringing in this kind of multidisciplined approach, we don't necessarily fit a mold.
Yeah.
And it's funny, I've had this kind of issue every time I'm looking for a job. In fact, I had the recruiters once say that they could put me down as head of EX, innovation, culture, learning. I'm like, great, this is awesome, Ben. And who doesn't want someone who's got this expansive curiosity?
Yeah.
A need for a richer skill set and trying different approaches. And their response was, no, it's not a good thing, because you don't fit nicely into a box in their head, and it's hard for them to grasp the opportunity of what you bring, which is really awkward for someone who decided early on in their career that they wanted a portfolio career. So I guess while it's the greatest thing in the world, it's also kind of possibly the biggest curse we have. And I wonder if one of the reasons why people copied you is because they're seeing you as having, either done a similar approach or having a similar mindset, and they want to look and go, actually, who's the people who have done this? And we go, oh, Perry has, maybe he's got the blueprint to follow. So I guess the question really is kind of, what what tips would you give to someone who's progressive, values being diverse in thinking versus kind of that whole
Yeah.
balancing act of fitting in
Yeah.
a set mold?
I think there's an intersection more than there's a space between them, right? And I think that's probably what I've come to realize is that it's not the either or polarity perhaps we had thought about. Is it a spectrum? Maybe it is. But I do think there's an intersection of almost like acceptable progressive rebelliousness even, that has a very strong fit to that traditional nature that perhaps you're trying to depart from and other people are holding on to. And it seems to me that if we take a sort of Pareto principle, if 80% of their objection is about the departure from the traditionality, you can then say, but in this intersection, you're not having to do that. You are still tributing the legacy. You are still allowing safety and sanctuary to come in from what you know. But if we ignore the fact that there is some progression here, we limit our chances of evolution or scale or whatever it might be. So I think I've learned to do that. I've learned to focus very strongly on the intersectional part of that. And there may be some real aspirations of mine that I've got to sort of push out there a little bit and kind of go, they might break the deal. They might be too dangerous. Are they so important that they should be in the intersection or not? And I've done a very sort of deductive process on this. And that's obviously dialogic exchange stuff that goes on with people to find out what they're comfortable with. And I found that a lot with HR leaders. They're like, oh, I really want to go there, but I think the board are going to kill me. It's like, okay, what won't they kill you for? This stuff. Okay, well, let's put that in the intersection. And that's generally worked and given them bandwidth to then go and pursue the dangerous stuff a bit more. So I think you've got to prove it. And that intersection, I think, between progressive and traditional is probably where we could spend a bit more time.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's always a juggle. Often you find yourself being brought into a business by someone who gets it, who's kind of progressive and understands the opportunity what that person brings. My last boss, Ban, was a leader just like that. But I guess it's often when you get into the business, it's when you get in there and you go, okay, the business is many years away from kind of where we are, and often the system, the business, demands for you to go into a box so that they can make sense of it, which often means that often you find yourself sometimes moving backwards and becoming this sharp tool going blunt. And I don't think it's, again, it's all best intentions. I think it's just a fact of, it's a whole analogy of oil tankers and speedboats, right? Oil tankers take forever to turn around in the sea, and often you're a speedboat going in there, which can turn around really, really quick.
Yeah. Exactly that. I had a flashback to a client who actually admitted they wanted me to go into the boardroom to be a bit of a grenade to kind of blow it a bit, because then what she said was they will then look at me and go, oh, don't do what he said, that's far too like dangerous, but what did you want again? And it was almost literally to get her case through. So I thought I could be being set up here, but she really was strong in declaring that's the case. And she said, look, be prepared because they won't like it at all, and they might even throw some insults your way. I'm like, okay. I mean, they weren't, they were really good about it, but I could tell that they thought he's nuts, don't do that. And then they went more favorably to where she wanted to go to. And in fact, that helped them with their big sticky issue about a group of people that they were worried about losing who didn't. They kept them, they retained them. She got her outcome. My stuff might not have worked because it might have been too dangerous. So I'm kind of glad she went with a frighten them, but then I'll bring them back again. I was comfortable.
Nice. I mean, fair play to her manipulating the system to get the outcome she needs, right?
I know. I don't think I ever saw them again, which is not a problem. Yeah.
I think there's an interesting dialogue that happens when you have to balance up the stuff you like to test out, something like a new model, for example, HR 3.0, while also giving the client what they want, which might not be 3.0, right? Maybe it's 1.0 or 2.0. How do you working with your clients? How do you juggle
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it is really difficult. And again, sometimes I have to give them sort of the art of the possible and very imaginatively framed, and then give them an option, which is like, but if that's a little bit too much of a stretch for you, here's a sliding scale back of different parts to assemble that might get you nearer to what you're after. But I can see this is possible for you. So I sort of try and limit the dangerous nature to it by conceptualizing it a little bit. But what I found is, if I talk myself out of that too much and go too sterile, I never get there. Never get there. I'm always drawn right back down the line. I'm like, oh, that doesn't feel right to me. So I feel like I owe it to myself to at least go as bold as I dare as an option, and then give them another way to assemble that. So I guess modular, scaled, and almost like a maturity kind of curve thing. So I've even been as bold as to say to people, look, if you want to, if you don't want to touch that till 2035, then that's okay, because that's some way off in the distance. But in order to get you at least a long way towards it and away from where you're from, here's the steps that could lead to that. So you could talk about it as almost like, the sort of metamorphosis type thing. It's like, if you're not ready to be a butterfly, let's get you into a really healthy caterpillar before you go into chrysalis. And at least that, you're still doing what you should be doing, I suppose, which is moving the dial. But I do have to remind myself sometimes that just because I'm enthusiastic about that possibility, they'll have lots of relevant arguments about why that's completely unfeasible. So I did something with a tech company where I kind of wanted to reframe the way leaders were positioned, and to create a much flatter way of having the sort of next level down, but still very accessible to those people in the highest level without it becoming far too demanding and chaotic. So I just gave them 3 pillars to work through. And those 3 pillars were about investment, both in capital, time, that kind of thing. Then they were almost like an operating system. So how do we work, make decisions, that kind of thing. And then the third one, I thought, they're going to laugh me out of the room. And I put Qigong, energy, healing. They loved that bit, actually. They were like, yeah, we know the other 2, but we want to do more of that. And I was like, wow, I thought you'd go, he's nuts. So there's an example where you shouldn't always talk yourself out of something that's left field, because actually that might spark them. I mean, they never used that word, don't get me wrong, but they really wanted to focus on culture and inclusion and wellness and dialogue and stuff. And I just gave them the excuse to go for that with that kind of random thought that I thought they're going to make me look daft. But no, they loved it. So there are times where you've got to hold your nerve a bit, I think.
Nice. I think you did right. I think, when you mentioned Qigong, like, it's funny, when I run kind of design labs, incubation, sprints, whatever, like there's a lot of time when I think about, especially when you're in that kind of moving from, really broad thinking to really distilling down actually out of your crazy ideas, which ones are the most, feasible, viable, desirable. But getting them into that big broad thinking space is really hard, because we've got years and years of this kind of adult logic. So yeah, I think the hardest bit sometimes is that mindset shift, right? Like, it's that thing of actually, how do we get them to have this wicked curiosity and kind of ask them to start looking at their challenge and going, actually, imagine if we could do this. What happens if we did that? Type of questions. And I think, yeah, often a good chunk of the time is in that space of getting them to allow things like lateral thinking to come in and connecting these unseen patterns. It's amazing to see kind of how as adults we often struggle to get into that space, and maybe it's a lost skill, right?
We really have. You're absolutely right. Now, I think if you are wise, like it sounds you are with how you frame it, you can sort of say, a bit like you do in design thinking or something, when really what you're doing is invoking childlike curiosity. Because even if you said to some people, Lego serious play, they'd go, no, I'm not having that. That's silly, playing with kids' toys. But if you said, how about you could 3D model the organisation of the future, they might go, oh, yeah, that sounds interesting. How do I do that? Oh, here's some bricks, put it together. But that's not mis-selling. That's just making sure that the linguistic side of things doesn't put the barrier up before they've even explored that curious approach. But I love the whole concept of, if a 10-year-old is asking questions, they would ask you a whole different range. So what would they ask you? This. What would your answers be? Not really sure. It's like, well, there you go. It's too complex or not well thought through. But yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It reminds me of that George Land paperclip study.
Oh yeah.
Where he gave kind of both adults and children a paperclip and asked them to come up with as many ideas as things he could do with this paperclip as possible. And I think adults got into like the 10s or 20s, and I think children got into the 100s.
I know. I love that. Ken Robinson TED Talk always comes to mind. Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
Yeah, definitely.
mm,
It's
mm,
brilliant. It's
mm,
brilliant.
mm.
So I guess, Perry, let's get into your writing. You've written 2 books, Transformational HR and The Energized Workplace. And me personally, I followed your writing for a donkey of years. But I guess the first question then is there any more books in the pipeline?
Yeah, so with Kirsten on the team, I've been thinking about this, and we've both declared an interest in it about how organisations' success criteria seems to be how big are they? How big are they in reach and global footprint and capital and product domination and so on? And I said to Kirsten, I'm really concerned that that's all we're ever gauging everything by, right? You're either tiny or massive, mammoth. But what about organizations who could become like ecosystems and be very diverse and have almost like mothership satellite models so that it's less about just a big empire and more about interconnectedness? And I'm sort of thinking about how Tony Hsieh, the late founder of Zappos, used to talk about organizations as cities. You know, they should have districts and people should have cultures within them and they should all interoperate. And I'm sort of loving the thought that we could create a model for what I call deliberately diversified organizations who can, at a whim, almost dial up one of these things that's more important to them than perhaps even their core offer. So, what we're going to do is research that. We're going to look at models that exist for that and speculate a bit about how it could work. So, that is currently in with the publisher to see if they dare let us go for that one. So, that's what we're thinking about, deliberately diversified organizations.
Nice. It's kind of got me thinking about that whole scale up and scale down approach.
Mm,
I guess kind of going back to the
mm,
EX strategy, what I'm doing right now.
nice.
And a lot of my conversations with people above me, my team, is kind of trying to stretch your thinking maybe, or bring in new thinking into that around the fact of actually we need to stop designing these traditional strategies. What we need to be designing now is an adaptive strategy. I think, and when I listen to an adaptive strategy is ultimately it's something what grows from shock. It unfolds as the future unfolds rather than trying to predict it. And I like your analogy there of kind of that scale up and down. It's nice, yeah. I thought I'd just say it just came to mind.
It's a mixing desk, isn't it? Yeah, exactly that. Yeah, and I think there's something in that, right? That strategies are playlists. However, the playlist needs to reflect the mood of the party you want to create, and so on, right? So you don't just go, no, this is the compilation, just hit repeat. It's like that just gets really tired. But if you throw in a little bit and add a bit and take a bit away and dial certain things up, I think there's something in that musicality we're missing out on. So I like where you're going with that.
Wow, okay, musicality, that's a
Mm,
word. I like it. I think when I think about something like this, I think maybe before COVID, that conversation was maybe a lot harder to have. But now I think, when we think about it, the evidence what has unfolded because of COVID, to show the importance of adaptability and basically how pretty much overnight many organisations' strategies fell over. So yeah, I think it's an easier conversation now maybe. But anyway, let's get into your current writing. So, I recommend people to follow you in your writing over time. For me personally, I find it a source of inspiration,
thank you.
provoking. It always
Thank you.
inspires me to write.
Thank you, man.
And actually, it's inspired me to write
Cool.
4 other pieces of content for the Not newsletter. Um, Basically around that your most recent series what you did called HR 3.0, which was awesome. So I guess, yeah, let's dig into that. Maybe, Perry, can you explain what
Okay.
HR
Yeah.
3.0 is?
Yeah, so if you know the HR world, for potentially about the last 25 plus years, the operating model largely for HR has been dominated by what we call the Ulrich model from Dave Ulrich of 3 aspects: business partnering, shared service, and centers of excellence. And that, I think, was a sort of 1990s way of modernizing the previous personnel model. And I think to a degree, it really helped because we had a different level of strategic dialogue and centers of excellence created expertise in learning and reward and so on. Now, I think in the 21st century, it's almost like, well, the world just doesn't work with 3 relays constantly happening with data. And actually, we're all there to look after people. So therefore, why on earth would you verticalize the game of people? So it's been bothering me for a while that we haven't got a new, refreshed version of it. Now, in transformational HR, I had a bit of a go at creating, again, intersectionality, 4 zones. One was transformation. Then you had people, strategy and partnerships, people, performance and development, and people, support and programs. I was kind of just almost relabeling, adapting, iterating, and building a different dimension. Reasonable good response to it, but I thought there's something more bold needed now, inspired by things like product management and the stuff that people like Jessica Zvan's doing in that space, inspired by systems thinking, inspired by people who really get the science of people, and inspired by people who have a phenomenal take on data and analytics and turn it into stories and narrative. I thought this is what we need to kind of do more of. But I couldn't get over the fact that those still felt functional in a way. And I thought, what's at the heart of this model? Meaningful work, purpose, and that kind of value-led parameter, the relationships that we have, and that strategic intent and the whole sense of direction. So I created 4 interlocking circles again, but I've removed things like traditional barriers, roles, and so on. So HR 3.0 literally means like Web 3.0, very fluid, very interconnected, almost self-scribed according to the challenge that you're facing, but also very disciplined when it comes to regulations and governance and compliance and so on, because it would have to be, but much more pioneering around products, people, process, and design.
So it's a 4-part series, right, Perry, or is there more to come?
4th part out now. It's 4 at the moment and 2 more to come. Yeah.
Perfect. Look forward to them. I love the posts. It got me thinking about HR as a whole, and in one sense, it's kind of like it's the best thing in the world, right? And in the other, I think it's like the biggest blocker and the biggest gatekeeper in the world. So I guess before I get into the 3.0 kind of, and we talk a little bit more about that, I guess I've got a bit of a question for you. Do you see HR as a friend or a foe?
Of people or the organisation?
Let's go with both.
Okay. So I suspect what it's done is become more friendly with the organisation, potentially to the distrust then that the people would find in it. So then they might think of it as a foe. And there's been a pivot during COVID and since, that the realization of being the friend to the people doesn't mean you have to be a foe to the organization, right? So I think there's been some adaptiveness to it, and I think we are probably in a position where we're frustrated by either or. And I think we're like, we can be friendly to both, and we can be a foe to the challenges that might throw the organization and people into disarray. So I think we've externalized the foe, rightly, and therefore we need to convince people that we are the friend of both. And by friend of both, I mean the kind of the outcome, the support, and things that matter. But that takes more than the philosophical shift. But a great question. So I think people would see HR too much as a foe, and that's not a good place.
Yeah, I agree. I guess I've noticed over the years a nice shift. I think we're starting to see a rebrand of HR, moving more to kind of people and culture. Yeah,
people and culture. Yeah.
It's always a case, I guess. Many of businesses lead with good intentions, but I've also seen many who are going through this kind of this change, but actually they're not really changing anything other than the name and nothing else.
Yeah.
And I guess I've seen this in many different types of businesses where some HR are really progressive and human-centric, but then some in the same breath are also kind of very much command and control.
I've often talked about mission control, and HR should be much more involved in mission control, because that's enabling the destination of your aspirations to hit what it should be, and that means you're coordinating and creating harmony in all those people who are doing all those things to make that happen. But you're right, if mission control then becomes almost like dogmatic control, then you're not supporting the mission, you're just being controlling because you can. And that's completely wrong. And there is something about detaching ourselves from thinking we have to control everything anyway. So mission control is just simply that the mission is all pervasive and powerful. So when people talk about industrial disputes, and they're like, well, which side should HR come down on? I'm like, well, it should come down on the side of the right outcome. That might mean supporting the organization, but it might mean supporting the people. I said, so it depends on the outcome. So I think that's too simplistic a way to put us in the middle of an arbitrary kind of dispute. It's like, no, we've got to be the one that goes, what's the outcome? What's the virtuous, noble outcome here? Not who do I back in this tug of war? So there's a challenge there.
For sure. So let's get into kind of your HR 3.0. So it's inspired me, like I say, to write my thoughts on how to bring HR 3.0 to life. But I guess as I was writing some of this stuff, one of the big questions what it got me thinking about was, should many organizations move to 3.0? And I swing back and forth on it. Ultimately, I think I land somewhere in the fact of it's contextual to the business and where you are right now. I think we said earlier, you might have to kind of, I first might have to help you move on to 1.0, then 2.0 before we even get to 3.0. But yeah, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, you're on version 0 at the minute. Yeah, totally. I think the reason I've put the model in a way that hasn't got so much prescription is exactly to your point. And so a smaller organisation might go, well, we can't afford to employ psychologists. I'm saying you don't need to have them all the time. I said, but if you've got traumatic situations or you need people science, you shouldn't just hope you're going to be able to create that yourself if you don't have the capability. You could buy it in, you could learn it and then create it. So some of these are questions we should ask that people still default to a role within a function. It's like, it isn't a role, it's an outcome you need to pursue. How you pursue it, get the right level of capability from a multitude of people and you'll get the outcome. So it talks to collective, it talks to external and even, shall we say, sort of specialist inputs when the time's right. But I think the thing that compels me to say, yes, there's a version of it for everybody is because at the moment, there's too little science, there's too little evidence in the real, there's vastly too little systems thinking going on within an HR domain, and absolutely zero, apart from a few, product orientation. We still think about the things we deliver as policies and programs. They're products. People use them. They're consumable. It creates value. It delivers an outcome. It's a product. And if we think like that more, I think people would say, I get what I need to do with this. It gets me an outcome that I can then be sure is the outcome I'm deserved of. So if we start from that point, I think we're in a good place. So even if they only go, let's do products, I think that'll work.
Yeah, exactly that. And I think that's what I really love about the model what you've put together. Kind of, it's built on empathy, right, to other organisations. I guess for me, when I think about it, you've got a Monzo-esque type organisation that's built from a product approach up from the ground up.
Yep.
But they perhaps didn't implement design thinking or system thinking into it. And then I look at like an organisation like Lego, who have empowered leadership, but actually they've moved it from a role to an act. It's something that everyone can do. So there's another key point there, which is around that capability. So a lot of the stuff which I do is ultimately upskilling people into design thinking, innovation, experience design, innovation coaching. But I guess there's a question around how do we bring that capability in, which I guess kind of leads me into, again, this is a stream of thought, which leads me into this kind of thing of, do we buy it in or do we build it in-house? So I'd love your views on this. So sometimes I often think many organisations are too quick to buy an off-the-shelf product rather than kind of partnering with someone and investing that resource in a more kind of longer term to upskill in-house so that it becomes foundational, I guess. So yeah, I'd love to know kind of your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And as a consultant, it's not a case of if you bring me in, as in you buy me, there's naturally the transference of capability, because unless you've got the capacity to do that, and that's part of the deal, you're just going to get me to fix a problem and go away, and the problem might reoccur. But if you've got the capability, it won't reoccur because you'll spot it and you'll change it and you'll not make it happen again. So you often see consultants come in, there's a bit of change, and then it all slips back. And that's because the capability hasn't been transferred. So I totally agree with you there. And in fact, I think it's incumbent on every consultant to have that transferal of capability in as part of what they do. Because otherwise, you are just an additional expert or an additional pair of hands. You are not solving the problem for future iterations, because but some people like it that way, because then they come back in and do it all again. It's like, well, that to me is a bum sale.
Yeah, I agree. But I think that's probably the big difference, like you just highlighted, right? There's a difference between what PTHR does and maybe how, and the measurement of kind of impact and value and the measure of partnership versus what, like you say, someone like an
Totally.
off-the-shelf, typical just
Totally
day
that.
rater would do.
Totally that. There are lots of examples I could talk to about clients who've done brilliant work, but that work wasn't done by me for them. I started them and I almost got them match fit, but winning the cup was their thing. So they talk rightly about what they achieved, and they may credit back to something I did for them, which is nice because some of them do. But I don't have all these testimonials on my website because I don't believe I've done the whole deal there. They did. And so I'd rather leave them to talk about it. And people say, who did you work with? And I'll point them to them, and then they'll get a good rep on it, right? So that I'm happy to do. But it makes me cringe a bit when I sometimes see some of these posts on LinkedIn that are like glorifying people's performance with feedback from the client. I'm like, I'm just really not sure that's the best way to sell yourself. Your clients should sell you without you selling what your client said about you. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, totally agree. I agree. Another thing which just kind of come to mind, and just listeners to kind of just listen to us bounce things around, and when I think about the 3.0 blogs as well, there's something around kind of the unique opportunity for organisations to do what I call organisational experimentation.
Exactly.
Like kind of ring fencing off a team.
You got it. I mean, somebody like you who joins dots and realizes how things are designed, you'd come to that conclusion, which is great. Part 6 of this will give some scenarios that help people do exactly what you've said, exactly, because they'll look at it and go, how do I get there? And that's what part 6 will do. And it will be iterative. And I've even mapped out a timetable. I've worked out that if you're a fairly big HR team, it's probably an 18, 24-month journey from start to getting to the point where you look at it and go, yeah, we've done it. And so if you're smaller, it'll be shorter, obviously, but you might need to think more imaginatively about how you do it. But the way you do it is exactly how you described. Controlled experiments, which reveal evidence, which build your next iteration. So literally that's what needs to happen. Now, an HR team will say, I don't know where to start. It's like you will, because you'll start in the place where it's underachieving the most. And you will go, let's put that right, because that'll stabilize us. Now, that might be ops, ER, L&D, OD, whatever it is. Start there, move that into the space where you can productize that and make that work well, and the rest will flow. So it's like domino theory, I guess. But it has to be staged like that, because I think if you said stop, let's build it, and then start again in 3 months, no, it's never going to do that.
Exactly. I think there's a wow moment there, a unique opportunity for organisations to kind of do this experimentation, providing that they have their capability there, and again through small ring fences and many experiments.
Totally.
I think we're not asking HR to change overnight, with HR 3.0, but more along the lines of run a controlled experiment over here, with the right mindsets, people, capabilities, and validate really quickly if this is right for you or not.
Completely. Oh, totally that. And I think we as practitioners will also need to gradually morph into the new thing, because in this model, you've got to detach a bit from both a role-based title and impact, and a sort of base that you call your own. So if you're a business partner, you won't have a business partner in function anymore. And people go, where's their professional anchor in then? It's almost like it sort of depends on what's most needed within the organization. So your professional anchoring might be in the meaning and the purpose and the strategy side of things, or it might be leaning more towards the science and the analytics. But the idea behind this is you won't have to always be anchored there, because it depends contextually on what you do. So people then say, well, what do I call myself? It's like, well, you call yourself what it is you do that creates value. So you work that out. I'm not going to come up with a ton of titles, because I don't think that's my right to do so. People will go, what value do I add? And that's what my title should indicate.
Yeah. Totally. And I think it kind of goes back to that whole mindset thing, right? That it's a massive piece and it's foundational to doing this, because if not, we're just going to get kind of instant org rejection.
Drives me nuts, man. It really does, because I've worked with change in environments where the stickiest point is what you call people after it. And I'm like, really? Is that the thing? So there were a whole group of people who said, no, I've got to keep the director title. It's like, why? Because that's not important now. You're much flatter. They're like, well, it translates outside. I'm like, Jesus, is that the only parameter? I said, well, give your business cards that, but inside, call yourself what you want. And actually, they did do that. They had a director level thing outside and on LinkedIn, but inside, they weren't called that at all. I quite liked that.
Ah, okay, nice. It's kind of like that Instagram versus reality.
Mm.
Okay, so before I get into
Yeah.
like the most life friendly organization in the world, I've got another question for you. What's your biggest
Mm.
ick
Mm.
moment
Mm.
in, again, take it people experience, employee experience, culture, whatever you like. Ick being the thing that makes you go ugh, like makes you kind of
Oh,
dry
yeah,
heave a little
that's a good
bit.
question.
What's
What's my
that for you
biggest
right now?
ick moment? I think it's the lack of recognition at senior level of how important the duty of care is on your own people. That makes me ick. When they are shoving people out the door because of mass redundancies in terribly ungraceful ways, and they're making people fearful of the future, that really makes me ick. It's almost like, let's get honest here. Let's say why you are looking to downsize, because it makes your share value look better. I mean, you might as well just be upfront about it. So that ick is really there for me. It's like, how could you commoditize people so much that you, at a whim, will almost destroy their life without good reason to do so? That really makes me ick. And it links to the capitalist machine and the whole perversion of share prices. And don't even get me on hedge funds. I mean, that stuff is just perverse. So, those things make me ick.
But I think you've touched on a good point there. And it's even when the moments happen, right? There's a way to go
Mm.
about them. It's kind of like that whole thing around it's led with empathy by design. So again, going back to your 3.0 and that human
Yeah.
centricity, if you look at, say, how Airbnb did it versus how other tech platforms do it, it's been
Completely.
very, very
Yeah.
different.
So it can be done, can't it? Right. And so I always go to an example of a manufacturing company who hit the rails in 2008's crash, and they could have downsized significantly to keep the sort of level of, I suppose you'd say, share value and operations, right? But they didn't. They said, no, let's actually ask people what they could do to help rescue this business. And they did. They literally crowdsourced around. It's a company called Barry Waymiller, and so they got hundreds of ideas coming in where teams said, look, there's 8 of us, 2 of us are near retirement age. We'll just take the ticket now and go. But make sure you don't get rid of Craig because he's just had a family. So keep him on 5 days a week and stuff. And it was like people did all these magnanimous things for each other. They came up with new product lines. They started to talk about new ways to sell smaller things than just their big things. Now, the uptick of that is the CEO, Bob Chapman, says 2 years later in 2010, everybody's still suffering. They posted their best year ever. He said that was because people rescued this business, not the leaders offloaded. Because he has this phrase, you know, if you're a family and you're struggling, you wouldn't sack your brother because you haven't got enough food. Do you know what I mean? So I think that's the example that I'd go to. Yeah.
I mean, wow, what a great line. I think that demonstrates innovation and applied tension, right? I use the word innovation a lot, and sometimes I'm talking about this white space innovation, but often it's less for the big sexy stuff and more in the ways of thinking, tackling a challenge, ways of working and doing. With that, I guess, when I think about it, with that example, I guess there's something around kind of that tension. The tension has come in, and along with that kind of time boxing, and it's that thing of, okay, if we can stretch our thinking, then perhaps we can turn this around together. Is that kind of a whole
Yeah.
co-collaboration,
Yeah.
co-design, I guess, to turn this around?
Totally that. There is something, isn't there, about critical tension that I think Toyota have often talked about. They'd give their designers a very tight brief in terms of revenue that they were able to spend on a product, but it had to have all sorts of luxury features. They're like, how can we reconcile that difference? That forced creativity. And I think you're right, in many instances, we don't just need innovation to mean indulgent spend or, like you say, knee-jerk technical solutions. We need people to go, what really matters? Well, let's focus on that then. And it comes to, again, some gut and some of that cleverness about how you manifest that as an idea that you can turn into a business proposition. But I think we surprise ourselves constantly when the solutions we need to help an organization perform better already sit in the minds of their people. They just don't get unlocked and shared and categorized and utilized. So, all sorts of examples we know of where frontline people can make a change and make a difference is always the story to tell. And it's always like, why are we not learning that lesson? I think it's just arrogance at leader level in some respects. Yeah.
For sure. I think Bosch is a great example of this, of how they scale open innovation in a business.
They're good.
And they scale it out to their people, right? They go to their people and ask for all the answers, for all the questions. It's that kind of, that scaled approach to innovation accounting. And ultimately, each person within a business can go after an idea. There's a demand and a need there. But then they've got to constantly validate it. It's about that kind of making that educated bets.
And I think that talks to another way to use capital as well, because the whole annualized budget cycle stuff is ridiculous. If you had a much more sort of like fluid and emergent cycle to your budgeting, I'm sure you'd do better on it.
100%. 100%. I think you bang on. Okay, Perry, now's the time. Tell me everything you can about being the most life-friendly organisation in the world, and what's the goal of it?
So this is where I refuse to believe that there are so many archetypes about what an organisation has to do that you then have to prevent people from having super balanced lives and perspectives, right? So, and we've done quite a lot of experiments on this. So anybody who works at PTHR gets to choose the days they work on and gets to choose the hours they want to work on. And has that caused any issues? Absolutely not at all. So we've got that as a starting point. So we're living proof 3 years later that people can choose their hours and it absolutely fits. So then there's the 4-day working week, where again, we don't work on Wednesdays, and we haven't for 3 years. And has that made a difference? No. We've had 70%, 70%, 40% growth in those 3 years and still don't work on a Wednesday. I mean, I breach it occasionally and I'll borrow the time from somewhere else. So there's that. Then we started talking about the whole sense of unlimited leave. And we did do a little sort of trial on this and said, right, let's try unlimited leave. And it was interesting because I think that the initial reaction was, how do we make it work? So we said, okay, let's put a minimum parameter in that every quarter you have to at least have a whole working week off. So 4 days, 3 days, whatever it is, a whole working week off in a quarter, because otherwise you might not do that. So we kind of thought we'd box it in at that end. And then we started to explore, what if somebody wanted 6 weeks off or 8 weeks off or 12 weeks off? I thought unlimited probably doesn't mean unlimited, because that could kneecap you a bit if somebody said, I'm just going to disappear for a while. I'm like, oh. So we brought in a little kind of guide, which is, if inside you feel that an ask for absence is going to cause a bit of an issue in your colleagues, or you're feeling uncomfortable about it, then you can ask the question, but socialize it rather than just say, I'm off for 6 weeks or I'm off for 12 weeks or whatever. So that forced us to go, unlimited is a bad term because it symbolizes you can just do what you want. So that's where we came up with life-friendly leave. If you think, for my life, I need to not be here tomorrow and I'm not letting anybody down, we're like, just do it. Absolutely do it. I unplugged for a day in May because we had a little bit of a thing at home, and I just said to the team, look, I can't be around today. And of course, what did the team do? Covered me, made sure I was all right, kept the distance where they needed to, and I came back the following day, and it was almost like, that's how it should be. It shouldn't be that we feel so beholden to an organisation that we have to get all these parental tools in, that we should just say we're responsible adults, and therefore we have a life and work, and all that we're considering is that our life comes first and our work helps us live a good life. And that's what we want to mean by a life-friendly organisation. So we've got our summer school at the moment. So we had a week in July where we said, look, let's just learn stuff. And we did, and it was brilliant because it's a bit quieter. And we've got another week in August. Companies don't do that. They don't say, let's have a week of learning. We did work in between, don't get me wrong, but the main focus was, it's a bit quiet, so let's learn. So it's things like that I think make us a life-friendly organisation, and menopause pledge and all those kind of things, to the point that we don't have policies, but we do have team agreements that set out what we expect from each other. And that's another thing. We contract with each other, we consult with each other, and we co-create with each other. That's where life-friendly comes into play.
Wow, it's fascinating to hear. I guess some of the elements you just mentioned there, that have kind of helped build that. I have this thing which I run with functions and teams, basically a health index, which measures against the traits of high performing teams, psychological safety. And the stuff what you just mentioned there is ultimately what comes up time and time again, what's most important to them. I guess, is there a benchmark you've benchmarked what you're doing and your org against, Perry?
So we took the Flexer verification test, right? There's a new company out that says, how flexible are you? And we took it. So what they do is they survey the team and say, can you choose this? Can you do that? Can you do the other? And we got our results back and we were 96% rated on Flexer's thing. There's only a few above us, so we're in the top 5. And that was really, really impactful for us. We're like, wow, we really are okay in this kind of regard. Because it's a bit like fish in water. You kind of get used to it when it's that flexible, right? So you sometimes need these reminders and stimulators to kind of go, oh yeah, that is really good, isn't it? Because you can just very quickly slip into it being the norm. And that was where we were a bit concerned about the unlimited leave parameters or not. But I think it's nice to just take yourself out of it and look back on it and go, does that make the difference we want it to? And does it help us perform? Yeah, it does help us perform, because, we haven't had significant issues about quality or anything. It's always been good. So I think there is an attributable impact to that, which we will probably bring out actually in our B Corp report that we do every year, because I think Kirsten's really got that nicely framed now, that talks about the culture and the sort of, they call it policies still, but we don't have them, but the ways of working. And credit to B Corp, right? When they did our assessment and they said, look, you don't have any of these policies. We're like, no, we don't need them because we've got these. And they went, oh, okay. And they said, oh, yeah, we'll accept those. So they didn't insist on us being super corporate in the way we operate, which was good. That will give us a chance to test that again. But my sense is that the feeling that people have about the commitment to each other and the thing that we've got, that keeps us straight.
Nice. I think just listening to that and you explaining it, in my mind, I'm thinking you're basically creating a company that nobody wants to leave, which is awesome. Like, it's amazing how in a time when people want more flexibility, we're seeing roles and stuff like that kind of coming up online, where it's like 2 or 3 days in the office. And I'm like, why? I've been working from home since 2016.
Yeah.
I think for me, it always comes back to being mindful of impact of the time. If we're all going to go to the office and sit in the same room and take Teams calls, then that's not allowing people to be the most impactful they can be in that day. And just, I guess, listening to you, I think it's awesome, Perry. I think it's awesome. So I guess then, how does it look like from like a ways of working, i.e. team patterning, tooling? I do a fair bit of behavioural experimentation in this space and looking at things such as user manuals and stuff like that. How is PTHR kind of...
Yeah, we do
Are
that.
you leaning into that?
Yeah,
do you have things like user manuals and stuff?
So we're very active on Slack, obviously, because that is how we kind of keep connected because of being remote. We're very low on meetings for meeting's sake, so we don't do that. We do a bit more asynchronous stuff. That helps us. So we use mural boards a lot and all that. We do have moments we come together virtually because they kind of help us. So whether we do, we've got this thing called the Leaderful Circle, which is where we talk about strategy and accounts and all that kind of stuff. So that's a very nice forum to have. We also have times when we come together to learn, like we did our Teal retreat in our summer school, that kind of thing. So that keeps us focused. We have team retrospectives. So we do those at least twice a year. Just generally, I think we are used to externalizing, vocalizing and narrating our culture more because we have to. But to your point about people would never leave, I think one of the things that is important is that we are self-managed, so we're non-hierarchical, so there's strong accountability, and that doesn't always sit well with people because they sometimes quite like the fact that they can escalate up or whatever. So even some of that might be appealing to people. When they try it out, they're like, no, actually I'm more comfortable in a hierarchy, or I'm more comfortable as a freelancer with a bit more variety and so on. So I called it culture building and sort of teaming work earlier this year, and it's almost like that even that isn't for everybody. So there are certain things about us that perhaps people are like, I like it in principle, and perhaps 80% of it, but the other 20% not quite for us. So we've had movement. I mean, we're not completely magnetic to everybody, but I accept that because we always do it gracefully and kindly, and there's none of that harumph. It's almost like, okay, well, you've worked out it's not quite for you. That's fine.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I've never thought about that escalation part. But I guess it kind of reminds me of that whole box analogy, right? Like, you'll be down in a pub chatting to your friends, talking about who the best boxer in the world, and someone will always go, "Oh yeah, but he didn't beat X or Y, or he lost his last fight to blah de blah de blah." And I think often we miss that point around the end moment, the ending of the experience within the business should be celebrated just as much, if not more, than when someone joins a business. But again, I think it's untapped opportunity.
And that's exactly it. I mean, that's such a great way to think about it. Yeah, and I think there's always something about when people come through us and either temporarily play with us or whatever. Are they learning something? Yeah, they are. They're learning a lot about new things to do, but they're learning a lot about who they are as well. And that's really important. Yeah. Mm.
Nice. Okay, Perry. So let's take us a bit out of the professional and get back into the personal.
Mm.
Um, what's the future of Perry Timms? Maybe in the next year or
Mm.
so.
Mm. Mm. Next year. So I do have ambitions still, and I am troubled by some of the things like the misfire in education system still in the world, and like I say, agriculture, climate, social like disruption, and all that kind of stuff. So I am bothered about all those things. But I'm kind of thinking my sweet spot is to help people have that flourishing experience of work, and then they can perhaps stabilize that and do other things to help us with the other things. So I'm trying to limit my ambitions. However, for the next year, I think I would really love to see some A players who are out in the market, either in a job or in their own business or whatever it is, kind of get this switch and go, I'm going to get behind something like HR 3.0. I'm going to get behind something like the concept of flourishing. I'm going to get behind the concept of self managed, non hierarchical organizations. They don't even have to come close to us to do it, but that there's a sort of spiritual link in arms thing going on. That's what I'd love to see next year be much more of that togetherness and cohesion and clarity and push. Because I think the more dispersed we are in an entropy situation, the more can slip through and that we don't tackle. So I'd love to see next year be a way we can really push on. And whether there's a general election in the UK next year, I don't know. What's going on in the US, we don't know. But politically, I don't think we can rely on that to solve our problems. We've got to get good people doing good work and creating good communities. That I think will help us out. So that's the sort of longer term mission. And I think 24 will see perhaps a little bit of push and quantum force coming from that. But it won't mean that PTHR becomes like 50 people. It'll mean there are PTHR affiliations and the mission we have that is common to a bigger group of people. Yeah.
Nice. Okay, so I've got another question. Um, what's your thought on these big companies kind of getting more and more involved in kind of
Mm.
social activism? Like, you look
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
Adidas, Nike,
Yeah.
Ben and Jerry's. What's your thoughts on that?
There's a fine line, isn't there, between very sincere, supportive activism and public relations and all that kind of stuff that's almost quasi product placement and advertising. So I think companies find a very thin edge to that. And Ben and Jerry's, I thought, have done it pretty well in the past. And it's interesting because, I hear people talk about Ben and Jerry's a lot, and I absolutely agree with them. And some people say, oh, all they do is create dairy, sugary stuff. It's like, I think that's simplifying it a bit. You know what I mean? The market likes ice cream. That's what they're doing, but they're doing it in a way that the company itself stands for all the right things. Patagonia always get it right, if you ask me. They don't even worry about the edge they're on because they're so far towards the right side of things. They're always a good exemplar of this kind of activism. Nike have shown up really nicely, haven't they? And they've stuck to their guns in certain areas, and a few have backfired. I mean, like the Bud Light thing, there was a bit of a debacle, wasn't it? However, what I think it is it shouldn't be borne by the board saying let's do this. It should be people are allowed to say this is important to us. So company, how can we be on the right side of this? I think that's where it comes from. So whether that's employee representative groups, some form of harnessing of. So I'm starting to see some of that in some bigger corporates who are getting it right, and I'll not put them on a pedestal for any other reason. I've been inside them and seen it. Jaguar Land Rover, absolutely, really, really listening to their people. So I think there's something really powerful about how that can direct the attention that you put into those social issues, because that feels more real, genuine, communally constructed, and much more reliable. The prods that then come on it will not be, yeah, but you invest in this and you support them, because I think we'll ask ourselves those questions. Can we stand in that? Because if we get audited, will we fall short? Because loads of these people, I love the gender pay gap bot that comes out every year and says, yeah, but your gender pay gap's this. You're supporting International Women's Day, but your pay gap's that. I love things like that. I think they're brilliant.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I do think there's something quite special about exposure by light, especially with the bot.
Good phrase.
Okay, I'm going to take us home now, Perry. Maybe 2 or 3 questions. Okay, so let's maybe go with the easy one first. Our mutual friend, Gemma, asked on LinkedIn for some tips on changing culture. I know we touched on it a little bit, but I guess, yeah, we'll have that as the first part. And then the second part of the question will be, who do you recommend people should jump onto LinkedIn and follow?
Ooh, nice. Okay, so when it comes to top tips, particularly around culture change, I've written down sort of 4 questions, but there's a reason I've got them, because it links to something that's perhaps more easily rememberable. So when you're talking about culture change, what you should start with is, who are we? Do you know what I mean? Like, who are we? What is our defining characteristics, traits, personalities, all those kind of things? I don't think we do that enough. I think we have an illusion about who we are, but I think we ought to really ask who we are. The next question then is, but who could we be? And I think there's something again lacking in that. Who could we be? And that doesn't mean who could we be like Patagonia. It could be who could we be in the manifestation of that, the words we use, the things we stand for, how we describe what we do. Then there's a how do we get that then? Because once we've defined who we could be, we need to know how do we get that. And then the other crucial question then is, how will we know we've got that? Do you know what I mean? How will we get there? But how will we measure it? What are the parameters we put in? And I think those honest questions need to be at the heart of almost everything to do with culture, because I think they will talk to verbs, nouns, adjectives, everything, the whole game, right? And therefore we need to not make a word cloud out of it, but we need to do some really clever synthesis about those describing our intentions and our commitments, and then how we'll hold ourselves to account on those. But this is the bit that I think will make that easier for you. Culture is, I think, 2 very distinct ways of looking at the word value. What value the company is there to create, and what culture helps you get that. But then, most importantly, how does your culture then link to what people value in life? So, what do I value in life, and what value does the company create? That to me is where you start with culture. It's almost like, what culture do we need that gets us both of those things perfectly lined up? Hope that helps, Simon.
Nice, nice. No, I think it will, definitely will. It's kind of got me thinking about the design of how we show up, be it consultancies, agents as an agency, problem solving teams, etc. But it's in the little things, right? It's how we talk. So, for example, Ritz Carlton, for example, have their own language and words they use. And I don't think we need to go to that level unless you're designing some great customer experiences. But I think there's something around giving it some real time and thought, and the design of that is super, super valuable. Okay then, Perry, let's get on to part B of that question. So who's the people you recommend everyone should follow?
Right. So that's a really interesting one. So there's a guy called Paul Taylor who operates out of Bromford Labs. He puts out some absolutely terrific things about culture, problem solving, systems. He's superb like that. And then slightly on a more random basis, because his base of coverage is quite random, a guy called Otti Vogt, who puts out lots of provocative things about political, psychological. He's a bit of a kind of meme killer and a fad killer. He's very worth following, because he'll test your conviction and beliefs and views and stuff like that. I would also follow the work, although she's not prolific on social posts, her work and videos and reports are good. Megan Wrights out of Holt Ashridge, employee activism stuff particularly, super, super strong. And then there's a couple of people in the States who I'm kind of picking up some really good stuff. Lars Schmidt is doing a lot about redefining HR. He's really worth following. On the analyst side, there's somebody called Madeline Lorano who puts out very good research about tech and about behaviors and about systems. That's pretty good. And Heather McGowan, of course, a futurist. She's well worth following. Heather McGowan is brilliant. And then there's a new guy popped up on the scene who posts really good stuff. A guy called Idris Ashard, I think his name is. He's well worth following.
Perfect. Some great names there, and a few which I don't know, so I'll connect with him. Okay, Perry. So before I ask you the killer question, where can people go to find and connect with you?
Yeah. I mean, before Twitter became X, I'd already started to minimize a little bit of my use on that. So I'm on Threads. I'm yet to sort of really dive into Threads, but I will do. I'm still waiting for the moment that Twitter kind of just disappears. But there are still some useful things I pick up from Twitter. So I'm on those platforms, but mostly the more discerning thoughts of mine go to LinkedIn. I blog on Medium, but I haven't done that for a while either. I'm thinking about Substack possibly. And you can jump on YouTube and find me talking about bits and bobs there. So yeah, LinkedIn's probably the easiest one.
Awesome. I'll link all them in the show notes. But before I get to the killer question, I have one more actually. So right at the start, you told me you wanted to be a vet when you grew up, and then perhaps you got into looking at writing. And as you know, Perry, we never really grow up. We never really stop. So I guess the question is, Perry, what do you want to be when you grow up?
What do I want to be when I grow up? I guess I would want to be a community activist then. Not necessarily an elected official, but somebody who can represent communities and hold people to account. That's what I'll be when I grow up.
Beautiful, beautiful. Okay, Perry, the killer question.
Okay.
Do you even like yourself?
Do I even like myself? It's an interesting question because the almost the sense goes to how dare you say yes you like yourself, because it almost seems completely arrogant. But then it's like, but do you loathe yourself? No, I don't loathe myself at all. I think I like myself in what I stand to do. What I stand to do in the world, which is not give up on things, which is support people, which is to add something to the mix of positivity that we need in a very challenging world. A constant sense of restlessness about what I know and what I don't know. I like that about me. I like the fact that I just don't know enough. I just want to know more and more and more. I really like that about me. I like the fact that when I miss something, somebody will tell me with good intent not to punish me, and that I can then apologise and correct that. So I like that about me. I like it that people feel they can say that to me and they don't think I'll have an adverse reaction or go off the rails. And I like the fact that I'm getting smarter at that earlier thing I said, which is who do I put my faith in? I'm getting a bit smarter on that. So I like myself there. I don't like my old self that just would welcome anybody and everybody in and then get shafted now and then. But I do like the fact that I'm getting a bit smarter about who gets close and what I can mean to them and what they mean to me. So overall, I'd say, yeah, I have a liking for what I stand for and do in the world much more than I like my actual self, I suppose. Yeah.
Beautiful, Perry. Thank you. Well, I mean, there's no better way to end an episode. Perry, keep inspiring, keep pushing.
Thanks, mate.
I'm sure you inspire many others like me.
Same. Nice.
It was an absolute pleasure, and yeah, thank you for coming on the show a second time round.
Thank you, mate. Yeah, really appreciate it, Danny, and good luck with the rest of the podcast. And yeah, go check out that earlier episode, which I'm going to do now as well.